This happened to me in the fall of 2021, when I was driving home from a friend's place a few towns over. It was a little after 1:30 in the morning, and the roads were basically empty, except for the occasional truck passing on the highway. Normally I take the main route back to my house, but that night my GPS suggested a shortcut through a rural road that cut about 15 minutes off the drive. I had taken that road once before during the day, and it seemed normal enough, so I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. As soon as I turned off the highway, the environment changed almost immediately. Streetlights disappeared, houses became rare, and the road narrowed into a long stretch of pavement, surrounded by thick forest on both sides. My headlights were the only real source of light for miles. At first, the drive felt peaceful. The road was straight for long sections, and the trees formed a kind of dark tunnel ahead of me. But after about 10 minutes, I started noticing how completely silent the area felt. I hadn't passed another car since turning onto that road, and the radio signal kept cutting in and out. Eventually, I turned the radio off altogether, because the static was more annoying than the quiet. I remember glancing at the dashboard clock and seeing 1:48 a.m. I still had about 10 minutes left before reaching the main road that would take me back toward town. That's when I noticed something far ahead in the distance. At first, it just looked like a faint shape standing on the side of the road. My headlights hadn't reached it yet, but I could see something darker than the trees around it. As I got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a person. Specifically, it looked like a woman standing near the edge of the pavement. She was wearing something light-colored, maybe a white coat or a long dress. My first reaction was confusion. This road was in the middle of nowhere. There were no houses nearby, no gas stations, nothing. Seeing someone standing alone out there at almost 2 in the morning didn't make much sense. As I approached, I slowed the car slightly, thinking maybe she needed help, or her car had broken down somewhere nearby. But something about the way she was standing immediately felt strange. She wasn't facing the road, she was facing the forest, completely still. Her back was turned toward my car. Even when my headlights fully illuminated her, she didn't react at all. Normally, someone standing that close to the road would at least turn their head when a car approached, but she didn't move. I remember thinking maybe she had headphones in, or was looking for something in the trees. I drove past her slowly, glancing at her through the passenger window as I passed. Her hair was long and dark, hanging down over her shoulders, partially covering her face. I couldn't see her expression clearly because of the shadows, but I noticed something that made me uneasy. Her head was tilted slightly downward, and her arms were hanging loosely at her sides. The entire posture looked unnatural, almost like she was frozen in place. After I passed her, I looked in the rearview mirror to see if she would turn around or wave for help. Instead, she was still standing in the exact same position, facing the trees, completely motionless. I kept driving, telling myself she probably just lived somewhere nearby, or was dealing with something I didn't understand. But about 2 minutes later, something happened that made my stomach drop. As I rounded a slight curve in the road, my headlights revealed another figure standing ahead in the distance. And this time the figure was standing directly in the middle of the road. I slowed down immediately, thinking maybe it was someone else walking, or maybe a deer at first. But as the car got closer, the shape became clearer. It was the same woman. Same white clothing. Same long dark hair hanging over her face. She was standing directly in the center of the road, completely blocking the lane. My heart started pounding because there was absolutely no way she could have gotten ahead of my car that quickly. The road had been straight behind me for miles. I would have seen her running past the car or moving through the forest if she had tried to get ahead of me. But I hadn't seen anything. I brought the car to a stop about 30 feet away from her. The headlights lit up the road and the surrounding trees, casting long shadows behind her. For a few seconds neither of us moved. Then slowly, very slowly, she lifted her head. Her face came into the full beam of the headlights. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. Her eyes looked completely blank, not closed. not looking away, just staring directly at the car with an empty expression. I remember feeling a sudden rush of panic because the way she was staring at me didn't feel like a normal person asking for help. It felt like she was studying me. After a few seconds, she took one step forward, then another. She started walking slowly toward the front of the car. That was enough for me to decide I didn't want to find out what was happening. I shifted the car into reverse and backed up quickly, turning the wheel to get around her. As I accelerated past her on the side of the road, I glanced at her through the window one last time. She had stopped walking and turned her head to follow the car as it passed, but the expression on her face hadn't changed at all. It was still that same blank stare. I drove the rest of the road much faster than before, constantly checking the mirrors behind me. When I finally reached the main highway again, I felt a huge sense of relief. There were other cars on the road, streetlights, and buildings again. It felt normal. But just as I merged onto the highway, something caught my attention in the rearview mirror. For a split second, illuminated by the distant glow of my taillights, I thought I saw someone standing at the end of the road I had just exited. A pale figure watching the highway. I didn't stop to confirm it. I just kept driving until I reached home. The next day I looked up that road online, out of curiosity. Apparently several people have reported seeing someone standing along that same stretch of road late at night. But nobody seems to know who the person is, or why they always appear in the exact same place. This all happened about 3 years ago, when I was driving home from my night shift at a warehouse just outside of town. My shift ended at midnight, and the drive home was usually around 40 minutes. But at that hour, the roads were almost always empty, so I could get home a little faster. The route I took most nights involved a long stretch of highway that eventually connected to a smaller rural road, leading right to my neighborhood. I'd driven that same route hundreds of times without anything unusual happening, so I never really thought much about it. But one night in early November, something happened that made that drive feel completely different. I left the warehouse parking lot around 12:10 a.m. and started heading toward the highway. The air was cold, and the light fog was beginning to form near the ground. It wasn't thick enough to make driving difficult, but it did create that strange effect where your headlights seemed to light up little particles floating in the air. After about 15 minutes, I reached the rural road that led toward my neighborhood. That road cuts through a wide wooded area where there are almost no houses for several miles. Normally, it felt peaceful driving there at night, but that night, the fog seemed thicker along that stretch of road, and the forest on both sides of the pavement looked darker than usual. About 5 minutes into that road, I noticed headlights appear behind me in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't unusual for another car to come down that road occasionally. But after a minute or two, I realized something was strange about the way the vehicle was driving. It wasn't passing me. It wasn't falling back either. It was staying the exact same distance behind my car. At first, I just assumed the driver was maintaining a safe following distance. But after several more minutes, the position hadn't changed at all. The headlights remained the same distance back, no matter how fast or slow I drove. That's when I decided to test something. I gradually slowed down to about 20 miles per hour, far slower than the normal speed for that road. Most drivers would either pass or back off at that point. But the headlights behind me slowed down as well, maintaining that exact same distance. My stomach tightened slightly when I noticed that it felt like the other driver was intentionally matching my speed. I looked closer in the mirror, trying to see if I could identify the vehicle, but the fog and the glare from the headlights made it difficult to see the car itself. All I could make out were two bright beams cutting through the mist. Trying to stay calm, I sped up again to about 45 miles per hour. Once again, the headlights sped up too, keeping the exact same gap between us. Now, I was starting to feel really uneasy. The road ahead stretched straight through the trees for almost a mile, and I could see clearly that there were no other cars around, just my vehicle and the one behind it. Eventually, I reached a small intersection where a dirt road branched off into the woods. I had never taken that road before, But in the moment, I thought turning there might help me see how the driver behind me would react. So, without using my turn signal, I suddenly turned onto the dirt road. My headlights bounced as the tires rolled over loose gravel. A few seconds later, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The headlights turned onto the dirt road too. At that point, the uneasy feeling turned into real fear. There was absolutely no reason for another driver to follow me down that road. It didn't lead anywhere except deeper into the forest. I pressed the gas pedal harder, kicking up dust behind the car as I drove farther down the narrow path. The headlights behind me remained there, still matching my speed. I could feel my heart pounding harder with each passing second. Eventually, the dirt road curved sharply around a group of trees. As I came around the bend, my headlights lit up something unexpected ahead, a metal gate blocking the road. It looked like the entrance to some kind of private property. I slammed on the brakes and brought the car to a stop just a few feet from the gate. The headlights behind me grew brighter as the other vehicle approached quickly. For a moment, I thought they were going to crash directly into the back of my car, but they stopped about 20 feet away. Now we were both just sitting there on that narrow road, surrounded by trees. My car in front, the unknown vehicle behind me. The fog drifted slowly between the headlights, making the entire scene feel surreal. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do next. Turning around would require backing up toward the other car, which I did not want to do. After about 30 seconds, the headlights behind me flickered slightly, then turned off completely. The road behind me fell into total darkness. My heart began pounding even harder. I couldn't see the vehicle anymore. I couldn't see the driver. Just darkness and fog where the headlights had been. I waited a few more seconds before slowly opening my car door and stepping out onto the road. The cold air immediately hit my face as I looked back toward where the car had been. There was nothing there. No headlights, no engine sound, no vehicle at all. The road behind me was completely empty. I walked a few steps farther down the road and looked more carefully. The dirt surface was smooth and undisturbed, except for the tire tracks from my own car. There were no other tracks leading onto that road behind me, none at all. That meant one of two things had to be true. Either I had imagined the entire car following me for several miles, or whatever had been behind me had never actually been a car in the first place. The air on that lonely dirt road turned ice cold. The strange headlights were gone, vanished as if they were never there. Where the mysterious vehicle had stood, something glinted in the moonlight. I cautiously approached and picked it up. It was a heavy, silver locket, colder than any metal should be. Back home, I couldn't put it down. It felt like it was humming, a low, constant vibration against my skin. That night, the nightmares started. I saw winding roads, blinding lights, and felt a crushing sense of panic. For days, I was obsessed. I cleaned the locket, trying to pry it open, but it was sealed shut. The pull to that dirt road grew stronger, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. I started researching, diving into local archives and old newspapers. The locket's design was unique, an intertwined serpent and rose. I finally found a mention of it in a blog post about local legends. It was connected to a disappearance on that exact road, decades ago. The story said a driver vanished without a trace, leaving only a strange cold spot behind. Driven by a fear I couldn't name and a curiosity I couldn't ignore, I went back. This time it was broad daylight. The sun did little to warm the eerie silence of the place. As I neared the old, rusted metal gate I'd passed that night, the locket in my pocket grew so cold it burned. That's when I saw it, something I'd missed in the darkness. A small, weathered memorial plaque bolted to the gate. My heart hammered against my ribs as I wiped away the grime. The name engraved on the plaque. It was my name, my own name, and beneath it, a date of death from 50 years ago. My blood ran cold, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. How could this be? As I stood there, frozen in disbelief, a faint click echoed in the silence. The locket in my hand had opened on its own. Inside, Behind a cracked piece of glass was a faded photograph. It was a picture of me, smiling, a picture I'd never taken. At that exact moment, a familiar sound cut through the air, the low rumble of an engine. I looked up, down the long stretch of road. In the distance, a pair of bright headlights was approaching, and in that horrifying, crystal-clear moment of realization, I understood. The cold spot, the locket, the ghost story. It was all me. I was the ghost, forever stuck on this road, waiting for myself to arrive. The headlights grew closer, and I knew the loop was about to begin again. The winter of 2018 was a particularly cold one. I remember the ice clinging to the trees, painting the world in shades of silver and gray. It was during that holiday season that I found myself on a long dark road, a journey that was supposed to be a simple 5-hour drive to my brother's house. Work had kept me late, a last-minute project that couldn't be ignored, and by the time my tires hit the main highway, the clock had already ticked past 10 p.m. The darkness didn't usually bother me. There's a certain peace to be found in the solitude of a night drive, the world asleep as you cut through it. But this route was different. It carved its way through vast rural stretches of the state, where civilization felt like a distant memory. For the first couple of hours, the drive was just as I expected. The highway was a ribbon of blacktop unwinding through sleeping farmland and dense, silent forests. The radio, a crackly companion, filled the car with old songs as I pushed onward. But as midnight approached, a flicker of red on my dashboard caught my eye. The fuel gauge was dipping lower than I had anticipated. I'd planned my stop, a small town with a 24-hour gas station marked on my map, but when I pulled off the highway, the town was a ghost. The gas station was a dark silhouette, its pumps shrouded in plastic bags like sleeping giants. A knot of frustration tightened in my stomach. My GPS, a cold blue light in the darkness of my car, offered a sliver of hope. Another station, 20 miles further down the road. The needle on the gauge suggested I had just enough to make it. With a sigh, I merged back onto the deserted highway. The next 15 minutes felt like an eternity. The road seemed to swallow the light, growing darker, more isolated with every mile. The scattered houses that had dotted the landscape vanished, replaced by the monolithic darkness of open fields and ancient forests. My radio, my only companion, began to surrender to the distance, its signal dissolving into a sea of static. I finally switched it off, plunging the car into a profound silence, broken only by the hum of the engine and the whisper of the tires on the cold asphalt. It was in this silence that I first saw it, a faint, hazy glow on the horizon. As I drew closer, the glow sharpened into the familiar shape of a gas station. It was small, old, and weathered, but the lights above the pumps burned brightly, a beacon in the oppressive darkness. A wave of relief washed over me as I pulled into the empty lot. The first thing that struck me was the stillness. The air was heavy, silent. No other cars were present, not at the pumps, not by the small convenience store attached to the building. While not entirely unusual for a remote station after midnight, the silence was unnerving. The familiar buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed to amplify the quiet, a high, lonely sound in the vast emptiness. I parked next to a pump and stepped out. The cold was immediate and sharp, a physical presence that took my breath away. There was no distant hum of highway traffic, no gentle thrum of refrigerators from inside the store. There was nothing but the cold and the buzz of the lights. I inserted my card and began to fill the tank, the rhythmic clicking of the pump a small comfort in the silence. My eyes drifted to the convenience store windows. The lights were on, casting a sterile glow on shelves that looked strangely barren. I couldn't see anyone inside, no clerk behind the counter, no one stocking the aisles. After a moment, I decided to investigate. As I approached the glass door, a piece of paper taped to it caught my eye. In crude, handwritten letters, it read, "Closed." I stood there, a cloud of my own breath hanging in the cold air, confused. The pumps were working, the lights were on, but the store was closed. It made no sense. I knocked a sharp rap that sounded unnaturally loud. No response. I tried the handle. Locked. Shrugging, I walked back to my car, the mystery nagging at the back of my mind. Perhaps it was a self-service station at night. The store itself shut down. The pump clicked off. The tank full. I got back into the driver's seat, the worn leather cold against my back. Just as my hand reached for the ignition, a flicker of movement in my side mirror made me freeze. It was a fleeting shape, a trick of the light perhaps, a shadow dancing at the edge of my vision. I turned my head, my heart beginning to beat a little faster, and looked directly at the corner of the building. And that's when I saw him. A man, tall and thin, stood just beyond the reach of the overhead lights, his form cloaked in shadow. He was wearing a dark jacket, his face a blur of darkness. He hadn't been there when I arrived. He must have appeared while I was pumping gas. A cold dread, colder than the winter air, began to creep up my spine. I rolled the window down a crack, the frigid air rushing in. "Hey, is the store open?" I called out, my voice sounding small and thin. The man didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, a silent sentinel in the shadows, his unseen eyes fixed on me. The longer I stared, the more the wrongness of the situation settled in. He was perfectly still, an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. No shifting of weight, no subtle adjustment of posture. He was a statue carved from the night itself. Panic, sharp and sudden, seized me. I rolled the window up, my hand fumbling with the ignition. The engine roared to life, the headlights cutting a swath of bright, clear light across the front of the store, illuminating the spot where the man had been standing. But he was gone. The space was empty. I scanned the lot, my eyes darting into the darkness, expecting to see him walking away, but there was nothing. The gas station was as empty and silent as when I had first arrived. I threw the car into reverse, the tires crunching on the gravel. As I backed away, the headlights swept across the store's windows one last time, and in that split second, my blood ran cold. He was inside, the same man, standing behind the counter, his shadowy form staring out at me through the glass. But the door had been locked. I had checked it myself. There was no way he could have gotten inside. I didn't wait for an explanation. I slammed the car into drive and sped out of the station, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I merged back onto the highway, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The gas station was a receding glow in the darkness, but something was different. The lights in the convenience store had gone out. The building was now a dark, empty shell. A few miles down the road, my curiosity, a foolish, dangerous thing, got the better of me. I pulled up my GPS, my hand still shaking. The gas station icon, the one that had led me to that place, was gone. I zoomed in, zoomed out, frantically searching the map. But the road was just a line, empty and devoid of any landmarks. It was as if the station had never existed. 20 miles later, I reached the next town, a real town with bright lights and people. I pulled into a bustling, well-lit gas station and went inside. The cashier, a friendly-looking man with a kind face, greeted me. As he rang up my coffee, I mentioned the strange station I had just visited. I described its location, the old pumps, the eerie silence. The man's friendly expression faded, replaced by a look of confusion. "There's no gas station out there," he said, his brow furrowed. "Not for a long, long time." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "There used to be one, years ago, but it closed down. Something bad happened there." He told me the story, a local legend whispered in hushed tones. A robbery gone wrong, the night clerk, a young man working his way through college, killed. They never caught the person who did it. The station was abandoned, left to rot, a forgotten monument to a forgotten crime. "People say it's haunted," the cashier said, his eyes wide. "They say if you're driving late at night, and you're desperate for gas, the station will appear. But it's not a real place. It's a trap. And the man who works there, he's not real either." He paused, a shiver running through him. "He's just waiting for his next customer." I left that town with a full tank of gas and a story that, would haunt my darkest nights. A story of a lonely road, a phantom gas station, and the ghost who still works the late shift. The road stretched out like a black ribbon, swallowed by the endless dark. I'd been driving for hours, the only sound, the low hum of the engine, and the classic rock station crackling in and out of existence. It was one of those nights where the world outside your headlights just ceases to be. Just you, the car, and the hypnotic white lines flicking past. I was on my way back from a work trip, a long, boring drive I'd done a dozen times. But tonight felt different. The air was heavy, thick with a kind of silence that feels like it's listening. I glanced at the rearview mirror, a habit more than anything. Nothing but blackness. Then, a flicker. Far behind me, 2 pinpricks of light appeared. Headlights. I didn't think much of it at first. It was a public road, after all, but they were distant. So distant they looked like stars that had fallen to earth. I kept driving, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, to the beat of a forgotten drum solo. A few minutes later, I looked again. The lights were closer, much closer. They weren't just following, they were gaining on me, and fast. An uneasy feeling started to crawl up my spine. I pressed the accelerator a little harder. The speedometer needle crept from 60 to 65, then 70. The lights behind me matched my speed instantly, maintaining the same unnerving distance. They were bright, blindingly so, but they had a weird yellowish tint, like old incandescent bulbs. It wasn't the clean white light of modern cars, and they were positioned strangely too high and too close together. It looked less like a car and more like 2 angry eyes staring out of the void. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a truck or some custom vehicle. But out here, in the middle of nowhere, past midnight, the road was a lonely stretch of asphalt cutting through dense forest, miles from the nearest town. No one took this route unless they had to. My heart started to beat a little faster. I decided to test my theory. I slowed down, dropping my speed to 50. The lights behind me did the same, a perfect, predatory echo of my own movement. Okay, this was getting creepy. I sped back up to 75. The light stayed glued to my tail. A wave of adrenaline hit me. This wasn't just another driver. This felt like a game, and I was the unwilling participant. I tried the radio again, twisting the dial frantically. Nothing but static, a harsh, grating sound that only amplified the silence outside. I turned it off. The engine's hum suddenly sounded very, very small. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights vanished. I blinked, staring into the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the same empty, suffocating blackness as before. Did I imagine it? Was I just overtired from the long drive? A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it left me feeling weak. I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My shoulders, which had been tensed up to my ears, finally relaxed. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. That had to be it. I drove on for another 10 minutes, the initial fear slowly fading into a dull unease. The forest seemed to press in closer on both sides of the road, the trees tall and skeletal against the starless sky. I was just starting to convince myself that the whole thing was a product of exhaustion when a flicker of movement caught my eye. On the side of the road, just at the edge of my headlight's reach. It was hard to see clearly, but it looked like a person, standing perfectly still among the trees. I slowed down instinctively. Who would be out here at this hour? Maybe their car broke down. But as I got closer, the shape became clearer, and the hair on my arms stood on end. It wasn't standing still. It was moving, running, and it was keeping pace with my car. My blood ran cold. This was no person. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, its limbs flailing at odd angles, like a marionette with its strings tangled. But its speed, dear God, its speed was terrifying. I was going 50 miles an hour, and it was effortlessly running alongside me, its form a distorted silhouette in the periphery of my vision. It was tall and unnaturally thin, a stick figure nightmare brought to life. I couldn't make out a face, just a vague, dark shape where a head should be. Panic seized me. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The engine roared in protest as the car shot forward, 60, 70, 80. The speedometer needle trembled as I pushed the car to its limit. I risked a glance to the side. It was still there. Its movements became more frantic, more desperate, its long limbs pumping like pistons. It was gaining. The thing wasn't just running, it was hunting. I didn't dare look again. My eyes were glued to the road ahead. My heart felt like it was going to explode in my chest. All I could think about was the next town, the promise of streetlights and people and safety. The miles felt like an eternity. The forest was a blur of black and gray. The only reality was the straining engine and the certain knowledge that something impossible was right outside my window. I saw the first sign for the town of Oak Creek, and a sob of relief escaped my lips. Just a few more miles. The glow of civilization was a faint halo on the horizon. I pushed the car even harder, praying it wouldn't fall apart. As the first few streetlights came into view, casting pools of warm orange light onto the road, I risked one last, terrified look in my side mirror. It was gone. The roadside was empty. The forest had reclaimed its secret. I didn't slow down until I was in the center of town, pulling into the brightly lit parking lot of an all-night gas station. I cut the engine and just sat there, shaking, my whole body trembling uncontrollably. The silence in the car was deafening. I closed my eyes, trying to force the image of the running figure from my mind. The jerky movements, the impossible speed. After what felt like forever, I managed to calm my breathing. I needed to get out, to feel the solid ground under my feet. I stumbled out of the car, leaning against the door for support. The night air was cool, and the familiar smell of gasoline was strangely comforting. I walked around to the trunk to grab my overnight bag, my hands still unsteady. That's when I saw them, on the dusty surface of the rear windshield and trunk lid. Handprints. They were streaked and smeared, as if something had been desperately clawing, trying to hold on as the car sped away. But these weren't normal handprints. The fingers were too long, too thin, ending in what looked like sharp gouged-out marks in the paint. And there were too many, a chaotic mess of them, overlapping and frantic. One print, clearer than the rest, was right in the center of the trunk. It was a perfect, five-fingered print, but the palm was unnaturally narrow, and the fingers were stretched to an impossible length, like the legs of a spider. I stared at them, my newfound sense of safety shattering into a million pieces. The creature wasn't just chasing me. It had been on my car. It had been touching my car. I backed away slowly, a fresh wave of terror washing over me. The gas station attendant came out to see if I was okay, and I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. I couldn't speak. I could only point a shaking finger at the back of my car. He didn't see what I saw. To him, it was probably just smudges of dirt. But I knew what those marks were. I spent the rest of the night in a cheap motel, with every light on and a chair wedged under the doorknob. But sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gaunt figure running, its long fingers reaching, clawing. It's been weeks since that night. I sold the car. I couldn't bear to even look at it, let alone drive it. I take a different route home from work now, a much longer one that stays on the main highway. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I can't help but glance at the rearview mirror. I half expect to see those two yellow lights appear in the darkness, and I wonder, what was it, and what would have happened if it had caught me? Some questions, I think, are better left unanswered. Thanks for watching. If you have your own creepy road trip story, share it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more chills. Stay safe out there.